Look, we've spent a century building a cathedral, a beautiful, comforting cathedral called psychology. We decorated it with words like trauma, healing, self-discovery. We filled it with priests who promised to cure your pain, to name your suffering, to give it meaning. But what if I told you the entire cathedral is built on sand? What if the most dangerous idea floating around right now isn't some conspiracy theory or political ideology, but this, that everything we've been told about the mind, about who we are, about why we suffer, is a lie? Not a small lie, not a mistake. A fundamental, foundational lie we've constructed because we cannot face what we actually are. Here's the thing, you think you have a mind. You think there's this inner world, this psychological landscape where your trauma lives, where your depression hides, where your true self waits to be discovered. But what if there's no mind at all? What if there's only a machine? A biological machine. Cold. Mechanical. Built by millions of years of ruthless evolutionary pressure. And everything you call you, your thoughts, your feelings, your precious sense of self, is just the machine running its program. No ghost, no soul, no psyche. Just the ghost story. Let me take you inside this argument because this isn't my cynicism. This is a philosophical position so brutal, so uncompromising, that it considers the entire field of psychology, every therapy session, every self-help book, every diagnosis, to be nothing more than sophisticated fraud. This is the worldview of classical brain physiology, and its message is simple. Psychology is charlatanism. The only real science of the mind is the science of the brain, and what that science reveals about us offers nothing but despair. Now, before we go further, you need a weapon. Because to actually see through the story we've been sold, you need a way to separate science from superstition. Real knowledge from comforting fairy tales. That weapon was forged by Karl Popper, one of the 20th century's most influential philosophers of science. His principle, falsifiability. A theory is only scientific if it can be proven wrong, if it makes risky predictions. If it sticks its neck out and says, if this happens, my entire theory collapses. And here's the trap. Any theory that can twist and bend to explain literally anything, that can explain why you're anxious and why you're not anxious, why you're depressed and why you're fine, explains nothing at all. It's not powerful, it's hollow, it's not science. It's a belief system dressed up in a lab coat. Popper saw this clearly with psychoanalysis. Freud's theories could explain every possible human behavior after it happened. A man saves a drowning child? Sublimated sexual desire? A man walks past a drowning child? Repressed unconscious hostility. No matter what happened, the theory had an answer, which means no experiment could ever prove it false. It was unfalsifiable, which made it unscientific. Compare that to Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein said, if light doesn't bend around the sun during an eclipse, my entire theory is garbage. That's a risky prediction. That's science. In 1919, they tested it. The light bent. Einstein was right. But if the light hadn't bent, the theory would have been shattered. One observation, total refutation. That's the difference. Real science risks being wrong. Pseudoscience protects itself from ever being proven false. So ask yourself, when you walk into a therapist's office and they diagnose you with trauma, with anxiety, with depression, are those real scientific discoveries? Or are they unfalsifiable stories that can bend to fit whatever you're feeling? Now let's get back to that machine. Your nervous system. You think it's fragile, delicate, easily damaged by stress, by heartbreak, by mean comments on the internet. But that's not what evolution built. Evolution built a fortress. Your ancestors survived ice ages. They were hunted by predators, they starved, they watched their children die. They lived through horrors you cannot even imagine, and they survived. The nervous system you inherited from them is not some delicate flower. It's a survival machine forged in literal hell. So here's the uncomfortable question. How did this biological fortress, this system perfected over millions of years to handle the worst this planet could offer, suddenly become so fragile that it collapses under a bad breakup? A stressful job? Social rejection? How? Maybe it didn't. Maybe our celebrated fragility isn't a discovery. Maybe it's an invention. Maybe we've made suffering fashionable, decorative, a way to signal our sensitivity in a world that's taken away all the real reasons to suffer. Think about phobias. Fear of spiders? Sure, there's evolutionary logic there. Spiders were dangerous. But fear of blood? Any of your ancestors who fainted at the sight of blood would have been removed from the gene pool immediately. That's not biology. That's performance. So what happens when you strip away the story? When you pull the ghost out of the machine and look at what's left? The consequences are terrifying, because once you start pulling on this thread, the entire fabric of how we see ourselves unravels. Step 1. No psyche. The mind is just the brain's wiring, a biological illusion. Step 2. No soul. If the psyche doesn't exist, the soul doesn't exist. Step 3. No inner self. That cozy idea of a true you existing beyond your biology? Gone. Step 4. No metaphysical core. You're not a spiritual being having a human experience. You're a machine running a program. And if there's no metaphysical anchor, what happens to morality? Good, evil, right, wrong. They're not eternal truths. They're temporary social code. Software updates, useful for keeping the group together, for making sure the organism survives. But there's no truth to them. The ground you thought you were standing on just crumbles away. And here's where it gets truly dark, because the entire mission of psychology, the whole beautiful story, is built on one noble idea: that human suffering is a mistake, a bug in the code, something to be diagnosed, treated, and eliminated. But what if that premise is completely wrong? What if pain isn't the bug? What if pain is the feature? What if all that anxiety, all that stress, all that suffering? What if it's not a problem to be solved, but the actual mechanism for growth? The tool evolution gave us to force adaptation, to build resilience, to make damn sure we survive. Think that through for a second. If pain is the tool, then trying to eliminate it isn't healing. It's an attack on the only process that makes us stronger. The shocking conclusion of this worldview isn't a cure. It's a command, hardwired into our biology. Let them suffer, because that is how the machine learns. So where does this leave someone who's genuinely in pain? Let's say you're going through a brutal breakup. Your life feels like it's falling apart. You can't eat, you can't sleep. You feel like you can't go on. What does this cold biological worldview offer you? Not a 5-step plan to feel better. Not a pill. Not a therapist. The answer is found in the most brutal, impartial, unforgiving principle that has shaped every living thing on this planet. Natural selection. Ignorance should be uncomfortable. Weakness should hurt, because pain is nature's teacher. Pain is the lesson. And to try to remove that pain with comforting stories is to interfere with the most fundamental process of life itself. The logic is brutal. Let them suffer so they might learn. Now, I need to be crystal clear about something. This worldview, when taken to its extreme, leads to some truly abhorrent places. It tries to strip all meaning from our most deeply held values. It reduces morality to biology. It treats human dignity as an illusion. I'm not endorsing this. I'm showing you where this logic goes when you follow it all the way down. Because that's what we do here. We don't look away. We stare into the abyss and ask, what if this is true? But here's the real question you need to sit with. We spend our entire lives trying to eliminate suffering, treating it like a software bug that needs to be patched. We've built an entire industry around the promise that pain can be cured, that trauma can be healed, that there's a better version of you waiting on the other side of therapy. But what if we're wrong? What if pain isn't a flaw in the system? What if pain is the system? What if every moment of suffering, every sleepless night, every breakdown, what if it's not a problem, but a process? Not a disease, but a design feature. The mechanism by which a biological machine learns, adapts, and survives. You want the truth? Here it is. You are not a soul. You are not a self. You are not a psychological landscape waiting to be explored. You are a machine built by evolution, running a program written by millions of years of survival pressure. And the pain you feel? That's not damage. That's the machine working exactly as designed. Now, you might reject all of this. You might say, this is too dark, too cold, too inhuman. And you know what? You might be right. But the question isn't whether this worldview is comfortable. The question is whether it's true. And if it is, even partially, then we've spent a century building cathedrals of hope on foundations of sand. Telling ourselves beautiful stories about healing and growth and the power of the human spirit, while ignoring the cold, mechanical truth humming beneath it all. So what do you do with that? That's not for me to answer. That's the question you have to sit with. In the dark, alone. Because if this is even partly true, then every therapy session, every self-help book, every guru promising to heal your trauma, they're not giving you science. They're selling you comfort, and maybe that's okay. Maybe comfort has value, but don't mistake it for truth.